Then we lost the place. Which was great.
Really good morning, everybody, and welcome to this joint overview and scrutiny panel on St George's Day, 23rd of April 2026. This meeting will be recorded and live streamed by Harbour District Council, and members and officers must use their desk microphones in order for this to work. Only two microphones, in addition to mine, can be on at the same time. My members to switch off mobile phones or place them on silent, and we are not anticipating a fire alarm, but so if you hear one, you must use the fire exit, and the meeting point is at the top of Mill Hill. The first item on our agenda is apologies for absence. Due to the change of administration on Monday, a number of members that would normally be on this panel are now portfolio holders and therefore not able to sit here this evening. That is Councillor Wellbrand, who is the new council leader, Councillor King, Councillor Nunn, and also cabinet members. So they are absent. And I have received apologies on top of that from Councillor Taylor, Councillor Finan, Councillor Stoppas, and Councillor Mahal, who has been substituted by Dr. Brent. Do I have any other apologies for us? Okay. Item 2, declarations of members' interests. Does anybody have any interest to declare? Item 3, joint overview and scrutiny panel minutes. Does anybody have anything to add to these minutes? Anybody had a chance to scan over them? And if there is nothing to add to them, we'll be obviously looking for a second. To move that. Okay. That leads us on to item 4, annual scrutiny report. So I will pass you on to Leah, who will present the report.
Chair, apologies from Ellen, the Democratic Service Manager who wrote the report, but she can't be here tonight. As I can present it in part. I understand we used to prepare an annual scrutiny report each year. It is a matter of good practice, and members may remember back to the peer review last year highlighted that we need to take some steps to strengthen scrutiny, and this is the way that we can demonstrate what scrutiny has been doing. The intention is that this will go to the annual council meeting, so that it enables council to say, yes, we're satisfied scrutiny is doing what it should for us. You'll probably notice the scrutiny report is largely at this time reflecting what you've done. Understandably, it's pretty much a reflection of we did these things and this is what we contributed to council. I think as we evolve our approach and potentially the next year, I realise there's only so many of these reports left, but next year what we'd like to do is possibly have some more factual statistical information and particularly start to see where recommendations are leading to outcomes. And one of the things I was thinking about that we could start to look at is where you make recommendations to change the budgets. As I know, Councillor Taylor and Scott, the amendment they proposed to the budget here in scrutiny is a really good example because you ask for more money to help with flood prevention measures and mitigating potential flood risks. I'm actually able to say, you know, well, that led to the creation of additional funding in the budget, and this is how it's been spent. So really seeing the outcomes of some of the things you're doing, because I've got a spoiler alert for the survey. I know that is something members are wanting to see a bit more from the scrutiny committee. So with that, over to you.
Thank you, Lynn. So ultimately, I don't know if you've had a chance to look through the report. I have. I was quite happy with it. The recommendation is obviously that the joint overview scrutiny panel recommend council receive the annual scrutiny report. I understand when it comes to annual council, I don't think anybody in here has any particular appetite for that agenda to be loaded with things that aren't civic related, but I did discuss this with Leah earlier, and this did go to annual council. It is simply a case of kind of nodding it through as opposed to having an unsavoury debate about it. If anybody has an opinion on that, they're welcome to share those views now. Is there anybody that wishes to contribute anything in relation to this? Okay, fair enough. So in that case, do we just move on to the next item?
So I think you generally, also, given no one's got any comments, it's probably that you're happy to receive this bystanders that you're supportive of it.
Yeah, it seems that there's no objections to taking this forward. Okay, that's fine. Then we'll carry that through. And that will bring us on to item 5, scrutiny development outcomes of the survey. Again, Leah will put this to you. You also should have potentially in front of you questions asked in the scrutiny survey. So again, I will pass straight over to Leah.
Share what's on my screen. Given my plan is today to provide you with the outcomes of the survey that's recently circulated to all scrutiny members. I realise when I do this presentation, some of the font may come up a little small, and that's why I've given you a list of all the questions that were asked in the survey. And then if you're allowed to, once we've done that bit, it may be helpful if we also talk about intentions regarding work programming for next year. Once we've done this presentation, so there's several people who are keen to understand that as well. I just need to switch back from Teams on my screen to PowerPoint. So as I mentioned just before, the peer review said we need to look at how we develop the scrutiny function of the council. We've done various bits and pieces over the last year. We've been much clearer about how recommendations on scrutiny are going through to cabinet and making sure that that's then reported back. We did introduce some covering reports for scrutiny, but the members then got a little bit confused about if it's a covering report for a report to go to cabinet and which one's which. So we tried that, it didn't quite work, we changed it again. But we've also been working, we took various steps, and I wasn't with the council at the time, to look at how we developed the work programme too. So there were things we did, but it seemed quite a good time to do a survey based on the Centre for Governance and Scrutiny Evaluation Framework. So you can have the Centre for Governance and Scrutiny come in, and they will do an exercise like this for you, but we can do elements of it ourselves. The first part of the survey was a set of questions based on what they see as the principles of this scrutiny. And then the second part of the survey was specific questions on what they categorise as the characteristics of a good committee. So we're going to go through the results. Unfortunately, the turnout was a little bit low, so I know some in the room did fill it in, but others didn't get the opportunity to do so. So it'd be helpful to understand. We'll go through each bit and thoughts you have. So the first part of the survey, and again, if you're struggling to read that, it's the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then the first 8 bullet points, the outcome of which are on this slide. So the survey asked members to rank from strongly disagree all the way through to strongly agree how they felt about the questions. So on that first one, understanding the role scrutiny has in the council, everyone that completed it either agreed or strongly agreed, which I was really pleased to see. And similarly, that it's genuinely important, there was a really strong agreement on that front. The ones of these first few questions was just about adding the value to the work of the council, was not quite so strong. As one person felt that scrutiny wasn't as council-led as there should be, equally the others were quite positive. Whether all members of the panel are contributing, and then just one person felt they weren't that well planned and organised. But I don't know if any members have got comments on these. I realise it might take a moment to digest.
Next.
That's just
Nobody's got any thoughts about any of that at all? Anybody fill in the survey and no? Okay.
On the negative, about positives of mine, but well, the negative comments were they all from single source or from a variety of sources?
they generally were from one source, yes.
we'll have a small data set and therefore skew that way.
Brendan?
I particularly like the whole positive. Scrutiny panel works in a non-political way and can deal effectively with contentious political issues. As in the past, I was the chair of iteration of this scrutiny chair. That was always one of my aims. I've been really pleased that that is all positive. It should be. I think scrutiny adding regarding the work of the council, that may be an issue of communication rather than actuality. And if scrutiny works well, it works before cabinet gets them, because otherwise it's useless, pointless. And if that just takes planning of meetings. But I don't know what other members feel, because I'm not a scrutiny, whether you feel that that's happening. Because that speaks to me of some people don't feel that's happening, because it's not adding value. And one or two comments.
Thank you. I actually agree with what you just said. And for me, I've been chair for 2 years, and it's always been really, really important to me that it remains independent. And I suppose particularly because I was a member of the last administration and I was then scrutiny chair, I never wanted to be seen to be marking our own homework. And what we did was we moved in the last year to, instead of it becoming a debate, we were sort of coming up with recommendations as a group and putting them forward. So nobody's opinion was ever left behind. And my view was that really helped people leave the meeting thinking that they'd added value to it. I think the issue might be that people feeling it doesn't add to the full work plan, maybe that we were receiving things too late. I think many people fed that back at the time. Or some people felt perhaps we weren't seeing the impact, we were just passing on recommendations to the cabinet and they weren't taking them on board. This is just personal views of mine. I don't know if anybody else has anything to add to any of that. Councillor Redmond?
I agree with everything Councillor Rowan said, actually. It's been a lot. I've been a councillor since 2015, and it's been a problem for a long time that scrutiny was held and all we were doing was rubber stamping decisions that had already been made. I don't think that's how scrutiny should work. I think it should be very much more robust. And as he said, suggestions from the scrutiny panel going forward to Cabinet to actually take real notice of and discuss at length. I don't think that's happened.
I think one of the most powerful things is if we've got a clear work programme, for example, what Cabinet are doing over the next year, then you as scrutiny can turn around and go, well, before you see that, do that, we want to see it. I think the tricky bit, because we've got a new administration who'll be naturally figuring out their priorities and what they want to focus on. So what might be helpful is when we do the work programme next year, we try and make sure there's just some gaps or there's some times where maybe we don't have anything specific scheduled, so we can squeeze in and so those items that you maybe can actually really help if we could add some value by looking at that first.
Brilliant.
I think sometimes we try to do too much. And we keep adding to the work plan and adding to it until there's no time to do everything. That's my opinion, anyway.
So Elaine will come on to a little bit about the work plan and the really specific reason that we're not necessarily talking about the work plan tonight. But again, I'm in agreement with you because a particular gripe the first year that I was chair was I felt like we were endlessly just debating the work plan rather than getting on with the work plan. Essentially, let's move this item, let's move that item. What should we do next year? What should we do next year? So as I say, Neil will come on to that, but it once again comes to earlier.
Actually, one thing we have mentioned about in terms of the results about contributing to work, I don't think so, like, so I think it's probably likely we might have a few turnover in actually, because we just had 3 events have to come on, understandable. We might get some more changes at the AGM, we don't know as yet, but what I could do is try and get some scrutiny training back fairly early next year to make sure members feel confident about how they can contribute best as well. So this is the next set of questions. I think the one that also probably stands out in terms of encouraging public participation. I think it's quite a radical suggestion that I might make in a moment before I hear your views on it. But actually, the bottom 3 all relate to, do we have public issues in the work programme? Do interviews the public feed into scrutiny debate and so on? So I've got some ideas, but it'd be interesting to hear from you around those points.
Councillor Ronan?
There's one group in the town that I would like to hear a lot more of, because I think what they work in should be talked about. I'm not sure of the name of the group, but it's a suicide watch group. I'm not quite sure what they're called. And I think that would be a really good group to have in and talk and understand the work that they do, give us a good insight into aspects of the society, because suicide doesn't only affect one demographic group, it affects every single one of them. I think that would be a good group. The other one is local or farther afield in the district groups that have received funding, to hear how the funding has supported them. Might be something else. And to get the Shire's medical centre in ASAP to discuss why they put that charge onto their car park for people who park in their car park. You know what I'm talking about? I think the council called them in anyway, but that kind of thing. If something controversial comes up, then you should get people in if it's in the right time frame of the meeting. I think that would be really helpful.
Yeah, on the suicide prevention, the group itself, the one I'm referring to, and it's one of the leading ladies in that group is called Wendy, and his son took her own life. Took his own life. Apologies. And I know this because when I was youth champion, she approached me about setting up the suicide form, which I believe the last administration had at least 1 meeting on, and I personally hope that the next administration continues that. So I echo your comments on that. Obviously, any public participation needs to be relevant, but you know, I totally agree that it needs to increase. It's basically lacking that area. Councillor Scott?
I totally agree with Councillor Brendan. They've had very good ideas. I had an additional one, and I don't know whether it's leaders. We often have petitions raised, significant petitions raised, and I know in government, if a petition has so many people into it, there has to be a debate about it. They have to consider it. I wonder whether public participation could feed into scrutiny in that way.
Yes, good point. Leah?
100,000.
I'm not seeing many petitions since I've done, obviously we've got community governance review, so we're definitely responding to that one. What can often happen is if a petition is received, it goes to council to be presented and then it gets referred on. So certainly there's the opportunity for scrutiny to be the body it's referred to if they're received. My slightly radical suggestion is there is nothing to stop us when we publish an agenda, or if we know an item is coming up on the agenda, basically putting social media out with, say, Microsoft Forms, just fill in the survey to provide us your views. And we can take those and, you know, say in the committee, we can say it them around, and that's not always ideal, it's best to get them in advance. But for example, on the work programme, we could either encourage people to submit work programme ideas, but we might get quite a lot. Or we could, for example, when we publish the agenda, just 3 or 4 days, let's survey open, where they could pick what they see as the biggest priority issues to them. As an idea, because we'll eventually get to the point where we've got a list of items to go. And similarly, like I say, when we've got a report coming up, either when the agenda is published for a couple of days or it's coming up, we know it's coming up. and something like affordable housing was coming up, you know, do you live in affordable housing? What's your thoughts on these topics? So it's an easy way of getting public engagement.
Anybody else? Any comments? Councillor Redmond?
Thank you, Chair. It sort of goes on a little bit from what Leah was just saying. I can remember a while back, we used to have the providers in for social housing. We don't do that anymore. And yet that's where a lot of our complaints come from. We have people in social housing that can't get repairs made or can't get in touch. I mean, platform, I know to my chagrin, is almost impossible to get in touch. And I got in touch with them not long ago, and I was passed on to two different people, and what came back was just absolutely useless. So the connection with the providers of social housing, I think, is something massively important. We used to have all the providers in. I can remember it. I'm sure other people can. And we were asking them to actually give us an overview of what they do, how people get in touch, all of those sort of things. That is sort of comes under public participation in a way. So I think that would be very valuable to actually have reinstated. I can't remember it happening now for 8-10 years. But it was a very interesting, I mean, it went on for 3 hours one night, but which got me in trouble. But I think it's a very valuable thing. And if the public are actually looking in on the webcast, actually that is a connection with the public.
We have applied to platform for the next meeting with services and communities, which I think you'll chair in a couple of weeks. I say we've invited them. Without saying anything about platform, I have felt there's been a tendency for organisations to be less inclined to attend scrutiny meetings because they just think they're going to get bashed. And so why would they want to turn up when they don't have to? But what that could mean is if organisations don't want to attend, that's where you can get insight from the public and their experience of dealing with those organisations and the lived experience by using the simple tools like social media to get some feedback instead.
So if I can come back, do you know how many providers we have at the moment? Because I can remember we've had at least 4 or 5, maybe 6.
I think it's going to the service and communities panel in a couple of weeks. So I can't remember. I have reviewed the report, but I can't remember off the top of my head.
You would we possibly release self-form if you're interested, Councillor Redmond. Councillor Brennan?
You mentioned social media. How do you keep a record of the number of accesses from the public to the social media channels that we have to know what impact it may or may not have?
There's ways of getting data, social media, so you can see the number of people that have viewed or interacted.
Do you do that?
I don't really do it specifically, but for example, we recently had one of the community governance review and I was able to see at a point in time it had 499 hits on it. So that gave me confidence that people were at least looking at it.
That was on what Councillor Brennan was saying, basically, that I've been a regular viewer of what's going on the websites, and I believe that some of the areas of it are quite out of date or aren't updated in a regular manner. So I'm concerned about that, and that could be brought into that area.
These are principle. Most of these are very positive. One, the scrutiny is recognised by cabinet as an important tool for the council. I do appreciate there's been a change in cabinet this week, and there's some exactly split views on this one. We are trying to next year get more agreement of making sure the recommendations are coming through on a time basis. If you pre-scrutinise something, then we make sure the feedback does go directly to cabinet when they make that decision. But I think the other items you look at more generally, we probably haven't been sharing those as timers because that's straight away we can look at. But sometimes it's by evidence in what action is taken that we really mean about how important it's thing.
Councillor Brennan?
Part of that scrutiny, I don't know if you still do it, but is to invite the portfolio holders to come to the scrutiny. They can answer for themselves.
But we have portfolio holder updates at each meeting. Although at the next scrutiny meeting, I think we're going to be bypassing that because portfolio holder has been imposed for a matter of weeks, so it's completely pointless. But in ordinary circumstances, yes, we would bring the portfolio holder in to be scrutinised, if you will. Any other views or comments? Yeah.
So potentially after gone through the AGM and confirm next year's chairs of scrutiny committees, and also we can then talk to leader about there are some good press about how executive and scrutiny work together and how they feel about that, what they want to do as well. To be going forward.
We have a false ones.
I think making decisions, so it's not.
But, yeah.
Absolutely.
So moving on to the second set of questions. So these effectively around to the scale where the top half is seen as the very best practice. Second scale answer is seen as scrutiny is doing fine. The third one is you need to think about it, you've got to get the problem. Again, actually, the results overall, as we'll go through, are pretty positive. So on this one, when you consider major issues, I think the view is generally we do consider significant issues at scrutiny, but we don't always have a significant impact. We would say a couple of areas like the IGR proposals and the budget made some really positive contributions towards the fund documents. So there is some evidence, but it definitely probably feeds back to that thing we just had about the level of cabinet influence and ability to change recommendations and things that happen on the ground. There's a few of these, so I can carry on through.
Yeah, carry on. If anybody has any comments at any time, we're going to just raise your hand.
So this second question looked at, is there evidence of scrutiny panel working with partners? I think, yeah, the view is there's some limited working. So it's more about when issues have arisen or things are falling through rather than it being a genuine desire to work jointly. That might feed into what Councillor Rickman, you were just saying about the housing associations aren't coming forward, and you're talking about housing associations, it's really frustrating. And also we think we had last year, we were talking about voluntary sector grants. It might have been at the corporate performance where the grant bodies that were given money to on a standing basis didn't come along, although they provide reports, they didn't actually come along. And so it doesn't feel as joint as it could be. So I think we need to take that on board and see what opportunities there are in next year's work programmes and really quite, no, we really want you in these meetings and there's opportunities to have on board.
Registered providers, do they not have a duty because they're in a partnership with us to provide social housing? Isn't there some sort of duty that they should be answerable to us?
Necessarily. So it depends on the nature of it. So some registered providers receive properties under the voluntary transfer of housing stock. So I'm not sure when it was in Harbour, but most of them are about 15, 20 years ago now. And within that, those documents often included clauses around who will be expected to provide an annual report and come along to the scrutiny committee, but some of that gets lost in time and other providers don't necessarily have the same obligations on them. So it can be a bit of a tricky one, and ultimately we can't necessarily pull people along if they're saying not available. It's difficult.
Elliot?
Well, can't we make it, somehow to the public, say that, the provider declined to attend?
We could certainly say that, so if that happens at the services and communities panel in a couple of weeks, we can certainly put that to work.
Councillor Austin?
Yeah, I seem to remember the last, we had that briefing from the RP liaison from the council, and I asked a question at that actual, it was a Zoom meeting, and I asked a question then about it, and what I was told at that meeting was the fact that I can't remember the guy's name actually, was it Raj or something? Right. And he said that he was the liaison between, and he actually spoke at length with the RPs, and he was the one that kept them all, registered and everything out. And so anything we needed to know, we just had to go to him. We didn't need to bother the RPs. That was the impression that I got. So if we're now saying that we need to start bringing them in and actually having them tell us their wares, as it were, I'm all for that. But I didn't accept that was actually the case until now.
Yeah, I mean, so years ago, when I first became a Scrutiny chairman, one of the first things I sort of mentioned was that Margaret and Councillor apologies said that the platform seemed to make up the bulk of my complaints. And to be honest, 2 years later, in terms of watering house, that still seems to be the case. They can't get hold of their providers, and apparently we can't get hold of them either. That seems to be the issue. And if that is the case, that when we get to scrutiny in a couple of weeks and we have no shows, then yeah, we're calling that out, because the residents deserve better, in my view. Start Redmond.
I agree with that entirely. In actual fact, platform and putting out these adverts on the television, right, left and centre, really saying, come to see us if you're in trouble or if you want a house, etc., etc. It's not a very good look for them to actually say that they aren't willing to come and actually in front of the councillors and have questions thrown at them, the councillors. I'm sure Raj does a very good job. I know him quite well. However, it's up to us as councillors to actually ask those questions. It's not an officer. And that really should be coming to scrutiny. And as I say, I just wonder, you say platform are coming to the next community,
They've been invited.
but they've been invited. I just wonder when or if the other providers have ever been invited in the last 7 years. Well, I doubt it, somehow.
Okay, so I've got Councillor Scott and then, okay, Councillor Scott.
With all these conversations, when you have a question, somebody jumped in and actually you've answered some of it, and Chair, sorry. And but in terms of, I spent the first 4 months of being a councillor wrestling with the platform over some questions. And if we could actually direct some of those broad questions that we've had to wrestle with into them, that would be ideal. Whether it's going to happen, as you say, whether they turn up, but it's another matter. But I look around the room, are we constantly, or as all members, dealing with RPs and the problems that crop up? It is very important. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Councillor Brown.
Just speaking on behalf of the platform. It may be that some of them, it'd be good to get them in and ask them, what is your communication channels from the public? And then the next question would be, how do you monitor its effectiveness? Even before you get to the problems, how do they communicate with their clients? I mean, they're paying that. So what are their communication routes? Do they have enough resource to deal with those complaints? So I think there's lots of issues here around an organisation And my own little interaction with Blackpool was that I was quite hard on getting something done, but they had some different legislative positions they have to take before they went in, and they had another side of the story. And I think there's another side of the story, but if they don't actually come in and tell us it, we will never know it. And we're quite welcome. We will not fight.
Yeah. I actually have a lived experience of this. I used to live in a building that had sort of half owners and half affordable housing. But because it was a block of flats, regardless, the problems would go back to the provider. So I'm telling you, it was so stressful. It was one email address to one person looking after 74 flats, who was constantly getting complaints about crime and fly tipping and locks not working and wanting CCTV footage. And that was the only channel. There was no telephone. You rang up the provider, you just got
That's my point.
pillar to post. And it was exhausting. And we moved down, basically, is the end of that story. That's probably why I feel quite passionate about it. Councillor Foreman.
Yeah, I don't know if many people here know this. I used to be the housing services manager at Harbour Council. So I dealt with people that came in who were homeless or were looking to move into council housing. And it's the problem back then, and this was, I mean, I left 6 years ago, I think, and it's clearly still a problem now. You've said about, we feel as a scrutiny panel, we're not exactly making positive changes in the council, but what about suggestions like, for example, so we have Raj, and actually he deals with more of the planning side of things, so he doesn't deal with the human side at all. It's more like, we need this many affordable houses, and Raj goes for them to deal with that. But we don't have a Raj for the humans. We don't have someone who goes to the housing provider. We never have had this, and it would be such a great asset for any council to have that. And they wouldn't just go to platform, but it would mostly be them because they are our main provider. And I've got so much to say on this. So like you were saying about how do you get in touch with them? They have 20,000 properties. They're dealing with people constantly, all the time. And they have, just a small call centre essentially. So you do sort of need that person who can do that. But my point was, I suppose, in a more scrutiny point was, is there something like, could we say, well, why isn't there a liaison person that works for the council? And can we influence that in some way to happen?
You've got your committee in a couple of weeks that's dealing with this. And if you're here because you're on the other committee and you're really interested, come along. That's you've got a couple of vacancies. So definitely you can even put it just for one bit meeting, but come along. Because I'm really at risk of sort of doing that bit of scrutiny tonight, because there's so much for it.
Yeah, I'd echo that. I think both sides probably need substitutes, and I would encourage anybody that is passionate about this subject to put themselves forward and sit on that panel. The more the merrier, but Leah's right, we'll get really into the nitty-gritty of that at that time. So, Barrel.
Thank you. I was just going to say that when the council houses from this council were handed over to Seven Locks, I think there were about 2,000. Seven Locks was set up to run the council housing. It had a little office, well, it was a big office down by opposite the swimming pool, that area. And I think it's still there. I don't know what it's used for, but people were allowed, residents and tenants were allowed to actually go down to that office and see people in person. And there were no problems or hardly any problems. But the minute that Seven Locks was taken over, and then it was taken over again by Platform, which, as you say, is a huge organisation. And I think their office is in Birmingham, isn't it?
Yes.
That's where the problem started. So originally, when I was on the board at Seven Locks with just 2,000 houses, there was a communication between the residents and the people running Seven Locks, and you could turn up and talk to people actually running the organisation at their front desk, and they were happy to do that, and they sorted out all the problems straight away. But the minute things get enormous, you just can't do it anymore. So there must be some way, and I think that's a really good idea to have somebody within this organisation who can do that. They will know the people, they know the phone numbers, and that's definitely a way forward, I think.
Just thinking about that in light of the next question, so I've just put the next question up, so it talks about how the gathering evidence, and like it doesn't come up very well on the slide. The bottom one is, we just get evidence, just get an officer report to note. I've always, wherever I've been, I've banned the word for scrutiny to note, because scrutiny should never just note something like you. The second one, which most people thought, is that the evidence such as performance and finance information shared, usually quarterly, usually out of date, and most evidence is offered as led and limited outside sources. And then top is actually using a wide range of sources. Members are able to have confidence to analyse this themselves and draw conclusions. Now, this is a great example, whereas members, in the next scrutiny, looking at housing, have got some experience of trying to advocate for residents, trying to liaise with those service providers, trying to work with them. And actually, there's nothing stopping you saying, going on all the registered providers' websites and having a bit of feedback and see what they've got in their annual reports and what it says about their complaint data and responses. So it's always within your gift to go out and do some of that digging around yourselves if you want to. But it feels like we're doing okay on this area, but there's room to do more. And also potentially, I've mentioned about getting some training out at Silicate for the members, but we could specifically focus some of that on obtaining evidence sources and finding out and analysing data as well. And similarly, the next couple of questions are on similar lines. This one was interesting in terms of scrutiny evaluating when playing evidence, because it's got one of the biggest positive responses. So, members attend meetings having reviewed evidence and prepared lines inquiries, and the evidence leads to recommendations. So that was really quite strongly positive, nearly half of respondents. And then half responses sort of in the middle. It's mostly prepared by officers and partly relying on anecdotal, but only one had one that there is no support to evaluate evidence and members can't draw from different sources. So it was interesting there. That's one of the most positive, but also a very slightly negative view. And then one, which is sort of this evidence base, is when you've got access to live information. They're sort of strongly, almost half in that things are okay. You've got some live information, but produced inconsistently or sometime later. You've then got a split between when it's quarterly versus actually got live information. So it might be a knowledge issue on this part, because we have a Pentana system which has got specific member sections on it in which you can go in and have a look yourselves at how different services are performing, and then key performance information and data in there and service plans and things. So I can have me as Kaya should be willing, Kaya, our colleague that manages that, should be willing to run another session for councillors to help you see that and how you use it.
Any comments or questions on any of that?
The next set of questions is more about impact. So we don't have anyone in the top level, which is understandable given what's in the other part of the survey. So generally have outputs, looking at process rather than outcome recommendations. There are mixed views on scrutiny impact, and then the one we don't make any impact, which possibly goes around. There's some areas where actually we've done some good things, but others where we're not really quite that one. What happens if decision makers disagree with scrutiny? Because it could well happen. So for instance, if we have an executive and scrutiny protocol, we don't have a formal protocol here. So again, it's something I could discuss with after the AGM with scrutiny chairs and leaders as to whether they'd like to develop one. I mean, this question is a little bit odd because ultimately cabinet don't have to do what scrutiny wants to. sort of have to accept that, but sometimes it's a matter of compromise, and I think there's nothing wrong with saying the cabinet member who will be in the room whenever we present items to sort of say, well, here's my initial views on the recommendations. That's also something I need to build in the council practice to see how the cabinet member feels about whatever's been put forward. It's been a little bit twitchy today. So, I think these last two questions are similar value about scrutiny and having a relationship. Then we had similar sort of experience. So one person thought the recommendations are very poor, they're only noted. One is actually it's quite positive, and we discussed things. There's a clear rationale for disagreement, but most people in the executive aren't in what they intend to do with them, and they're more noted. And then I think I said earlier, we do want to improve that flow of information between scrutiny and executive on what's happening next year. And then the final question is where things go wrong. So I think this is actually one of our strongest positive things, that when things get difficult, we can sort it out, which was very nice to see. And then, yeah, the main of the majority is that some meetings don't quite go right. We don't get the relationship with the cabinet and the response from cabinet as we want. And therefore we just sort of result to a process whereby things go there and then things go there and then they go there to try and get resolved. But again, only one sort of negative response, that scrutiny is not effective and the executive just go, no, we're not interested in scrutiny.
Yeah, I think we've, as I say, I think I do feel like we've made a lot of headway on scrutiny, and what I mentioned earlier, the way it's moved. I know, in the last meeting, Councillor Nunn giving us warm feedback about the scrutiny tracker that we've had. So you're actually seeing what's going on with the decisions. But I do think the next scrutiny panel and whoever chairs that, I still believe they obviously have work to do to get this to be more robust. I'm not going to pretend that during the 2 years I've been doing this that it's been perfect, but I think we're laying the groundwork for improvement, and I think that is reflected in sometimes mixed feedback, but overall I'm quite pleased with the feedback, and thank you very much for your work on that.
Yeah. And thank you to the members that completed the survey and your contributions tonight. There's a few more.
Yes, please.
Forms, but one of them does touch on the work programme. So leaving the work programme aside, one of the things was that the feedback from cabinet, which we said a bit about tonight. The final 3 bullet points were more negative. So one said we don't have dedicated resources or scrutiny function. So if you used to be a county councillor, you would know that at county they have to have a statutory scrutiny officer, and that's partly because they have a statutory health scrutiny function, so they hold the health boards to account, and the police and crime panel, which is police scrutiny, they run those as well. So by law, they have to have a specific officer that only deals with those things. Here we don't necessarily have the capacity just to have one person dedicated to that, but Sarah and Alec in our democratic service team each take responsibility for one of the committees, so you've got that overview of what we're doing throughout the year. And also members therefore know which officer they turn to when they've got a question. I was a little saddened that we got feedback and recommendations could be watered down, because we have tried to work to make sure we read out the recommendations that you've come up with in the debate and you agree them before. So I was a bit surprised by that one. And I hope we do give opportunity for members to speak if they want to. Yes, on the last 2 parts, the panel now makes the recommendations to themselves, and we've agreed with them at the end. So I would suggest that members get it watered down. They're welcome to push a bit back on that and make them stronger. I've tried to make sure everybody is heard, but it can be problematic in every meeting that we have, that some people like to speak more than others, and that can be quite a difficult thing to navigate at times, but fair comment. Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I'm only teaching people something, but I thought that the communication channels between ourselves and the executive is one which has to be not only a two-way street, but a receptive two-way street. And in that respect, whatever we come up with with these panels and any recommendation we go, it's how that is received in that next level up, as to whether one, how effective it becomes, and two, whether anything gets done about it. Communication is the name of the game. So I think for ourselves, we need to concentrate on how we communicate these things going up the channel, because obviously it's not what you say, it's how you say it. And that will determine how it's received and then comes back hopefully with the positive outcome at the end.
The other thing I just wanted to mention was the work programme, and for a couple of reasons. We held back on doing the work programme today. I think you did the work programme at this meeting this time last year, but the problem is that you get a few visitors join the committee at the AGM or get a bit of turnover, and then they've not contributed to the work programme. They go, well, I didn't answer this. So we're hoping in the next week or two we'll be sharing the draft calendar meetings. What we're proposing is that a couple of weeks after the AGM, we'll have a scrutiny meeting that will set the work programmes for the year. But in the meantime, we'll be circulating an online form that all members can complete. It'll say, I'd like this item to come before scrutiny. This is why I think it would add value. Here's some information sources. Here's some thoughts on how scrutiny could be done. So, for example, if you think it'd be good to have a little task and finish a group that meets 3 or 4 times and then comes back, we can do that. But it gives members every opportunity to suggest why they think it would be good to look at that topic. So rather than necessarily just seeing one line and like, can we look at that strategy or policy, you've got some decent piece of information to work from, and all members will have the chance to input to that process. And even those that are new will then on the committee will still have a few days before the agenda goes out with these suggestions on if they do have any last minute proposals or ideas.
Yes, thank you, Leah. Also felt very strongly that it was not up to me or necessarily this panel to tie the next panel's hands behind their back, so to speak, with a work plan. I know it was quite frustrating when I first came in to inherit a work plan. So I felt that was the right thing to do, and I'm glad that's what we've taken forward. So once again, thank you, Leah, very much for your hard work on this and the other officers. Is there any other questions or comments for Leah in regards to this report or work plan? If the vote on this, do you?
Would it be helpful? I've just picked out a few action points.
Yes, please.
So try to push where there are relevant items in the work programme for partners to attend, look at those opportunities, make sure they can involve. Using social media to promote the work programme and items coming forward, scrutiny to get public feedback. Ensure there's some training put on early in the civic year. I was going to put down, use the debates day to reinforce the platform, the need for them to attend the services and communities scrutiny meeting in May. It's quite useful because I can say how important it is. And also to ask Kaylee to run some sessions on using Pentana for members.
Thank you very much. Well, that's, I think, been overwhelmingly positive, and I'm really pleased that I think everybody has contributed to that in some way. So I can move on to the last item on the agenda, which is any urgent business, which there is none. Time is 23 minutes past 7, and I therefore call this meeting to an end.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.